They called me the trophy wife who got lucky. His mother said I trapped him. Society whispered I'd be nothing without his last name. But when I walked away from billions, I didn't just survive. I became the one thing he never saw coming. Now, he's the one begging at my door. If you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship, or wondered what happens when you finally choose yourself, stay with me. This story gets wild. And if you're here for the karma, oh honey, hit that like button, because he gets everything he deserves. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. My name is Brielle Thompson. Well, it's Thompson again now. For 5 years, I was Brielle Whitmore, wife of Lawrence Whitmore III, real estate billionaire, hotel magnate, and the man who made me feel like a ghost in my own life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when I still believed in fairy tales. I met Lawrence at an auction house, where I worked as an art curator. I specialized in African diaspora art, and I was good at my job, really good. I had an eye for pieces that others overlooked, could spot authenticity from across a room, and I loved what I did. Lawrence came in looking for art to furnish his newest luxury hotel, and something about the way I spoke about the pieces caught his attention. He said I made art come alive. He said I had a gift. He said a lot of things back then. The courtship was intense. Flowers every day. Calls that lasted until 3 in the morning. He wanted to know everything about me. My childhood, my dreams, my favorite foods, the books that made me cry. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced before. 6 months later, he proposed on a rooftop in Paris, with the Eiffel Tower glittering behind us. I said yes because I genuinely believed we were building something beautiful together. The first year of marriage was almost perfect. Almost. He valued my opinion on which art pieces to acquire for his properties. We traveled together. We had breakfast on lazy Sunday mornings. But then his empire expanded. More hotels, more properties, more international deals. And slowly, like sand slipping through fingers, I felt him disappearing. It started small. Missed dinners because of conference calls with investors in Tokyo. Forgotten date nights because a property deal in Dubai needed his immediate attention. I told myself I understood. He was building an empire. I was supposed to be supportive. That's what wives do, right? But support turned into silence. Understanding turned into invisibility. By our 3rd anniversary, I couldn't remember the last time we had a real conversation. Not about business or logistics, or what event we needed to attend next, but a real conversation. The kind where you talk about dreams and fears and the things that keep you awake at 3 in the morning. I was living in a $15 million penthouse, wearing designer clothes, attending galas where champagne cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. And I was absolutely miserable. His mother, Delphine, never thought I was good enough for her son. Old money has a way of looking at new additions to the family. And when that addition is a black woman from Brooklyn who worked her way through college, well, let's just say the judgment was thick enough to cut with a knife. She'd host family brunches and forget to tell me. She'd make comments about how I spent my days, as if curating art and managing charitable foundations wasn't real work. And Lawrence? He never defended me, not once. He'd just give me that tired smile that said, "That's just how she is," and expect me to swallow my dignity along with my overpriced brunch. Then there was Gretchen, his assistant. That woman worshipped the ground he walked on, and she made sure I knew that she knew his schedule better than I knew my own husband. She'd interrupt our rare dinners with urgent calls that could have waited. She'd book his calendar without checking if we had plans. And the way she'd say, "Lawrence needs me," with that proprietary tone, made my blood boil. But what could I say? I was just the wife. She was essential to his empire. Our 5th anniversary was the final straw. Lawrence promised me, swore to me, that this one would be different. He'd booked a reservation at the restaurant where he proposed, the one with the private balcony overlooking the city. I bought a new dress, got my hair done, wore the perfume he loved, and I waited. I sat at that table for 2 hours, watching pitying looks from the waitstaff, declining their offers to order, checking my phone every 30 seconds. He was in Singapore. He'd forgotten entirely, not just forgotten. He'd flown halfway around the world without even a second thought about what day it was. The text came at the 2-hour mark. "So sorry, darling. Major deal. We'll make it up to you. Love you." 3 days later, a diamond necklace arrived. Another apology I could wear around my neck like a beautiful, expensive noose. That night, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, wearing that necklace, and I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. When had I become this person? When had I learned to smile through the pain? To accept jewelry instead of genuine love? To make myself smaller and smaller until I practically disappeared? I took off the necklace, placed it carefully in its velvet box, and made a decision that would change everything. The divorce attorney's office smelled like leather and old books. I told her I didn't want a war. I didn't want to destroy him or take him for everything he had said. I just wanted out. I just wanted to breathe again. When I told Lawrence I wanted a divorce, the shock on his face would have been comical if it wasn't so tragic. "This is sudden," he said, like our marriage hadn't been dying a slow death for 3 years. "We can work on this." Couples therapy. "I'll cut back on travel. Whatever you need." I looked at him, really looked at him, and said, "I've been working on this alone for 3 years, Lawrence. I'm tired." He tried to negotiate, offered me houses, cars, more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. He thought everything had a price tag. He thought I was just another acquisition that needed the right bid. But I didn't want his empire. I took the brownstone in Brooklyn, the first property we'd bought together, the one he'd forgotten he even owned. I took enough money to be comfortable, but not wealthy. And I took back my name, Brielle Thompson, the woman I'd been, and before I tried to fold myself into someone else's life. The brownstone became my sanctuary. I spent weeks stripping away everything that reminded me of him, of us, of the life I'd outgrown. In the basement, I found this incredible space with exposed brick and perfect lighting. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was going back to what I loved. I was opening a gallery, Sankofa Gallery. It means go back and get it in a Khan. Go back and reclaim what you lost. I dedicated it to emerging Black artists, the ones who never got a fair shot, whose work was overlooked because they didn't have the right connections or the right last name. I used every connection I'd made in my years in the art world. I worked 18-hour days. I painted walls myself. I hung lights. I curated with the same passion I'd buried for 5 years. 3 months after opening, we held our first exhibition. 6 months after that, Sankofa was being written about in every major art publication. Not because of who I used to be married to, because of the work. Because I had an eye for talent that was undeniable. Because I'd built something real, something that mattered, something that was entirely mine. I cut my locks into a natural crown that framed my face. I wore colors that made me happy, instead of colors that photographed well. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. I even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just remembering what it felt like to have someone actually listen when I spoke. Then I met Devin Clark at an artist talk. He was a documentary filmmaker, and the way he asked questions, the way he was genuinely curious about the world, it reminded me of who I used to be. We started as friends, long conversations about art and purpose and what it means to create something meaningful. He never once asked about my ex-husband. He never treated me like I was damaged goods or a conquest. He just saw me, the real me. Meanwhile, Lawrence's world was crumbling in ways I only heard about through mutual acquaintances. His new hotel projects were failing. Business partners were complaining that his properties lacked the special touch they used to have. Turns out, all those years, my artistic input had been more valuable than anyone realized. Without me, his hotels were just expensive buildings with no soul. Gretchen apparently confessed her feelings to him at some company dinner. It made him so uncomfortable that he started avoiding her, and she responded by systematically sabotaging his schedule. Double-booked meetings, forgotten calls with major investors. She eventually quit in spectacular fashion, sending a company-wide email about how unappreciated she felt. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then came the magazine feature. Art and Culture ran a major piece on Sankofa Gallery and emerging Black artists reshaping the art world. The photo they used was one where I was laughing at something off camera, surrounded by paintings, wearing this bright yellow dress that made me look like sunshine. The caption read, "Curator Brielle Thompson is reshaping the art world by amplifying voices that have been silenced for too long." No mention of Lawrence, no reference to my past, just me and my work and my vision. I found out later that he saw that magazine, that he stared at that photo for a long time, that he realized I wasn't just surviving without him, I was thriving. The emails started after that. Professional at first. He needed advice on an art acquisition for a property in Miami. Could I recommend someone? I didn't respond. Then flowers arrived at the gallery, elaborate arrangements that I immediately donated to the local hospital. Then he started showing up at exhibition openings, at artist talks, always in the back, always watching. The first time he approached me at one of my events, Devin was standing next to me. I introduced them politely, professionally. Devin shook his hand and said something kind about Lawrence's hotels. And I watched Lawrence's face as he saw the way Devin's hand rested on my lower back, the way I leaned into him slightly, the way I smiled at Devin with genuine warmth. I'd never smiled at Lawrence that way, not even in the beginning. He tried to invest in my gallery next, called it a business opportunity, offered an obscene amount of money with no strings attached. I declined in an email that took me 3 minutes to write. "I built this without you, Lawrence. I don't need you now." But send. His mother called me after that. Delphine Whitmore, who once told me at a family dinner that I'd done well for myself, marrying her son, called to tell me she'd made a mistake, that she'd judged me unfairly, that watching what I'd built made her respect me in ways she never had when I was married to her son. "You were always a gem, Brielle. He treated you like glass, pretty but fragile and disposable. I'm sorry I never saw what you were made of." I thanked her and meant it. But I didn't need her apology to validate my worth anymore. I'd found that on my own. Lawrence's desperation grew in proportion to my success. He gave an interview to some business magazine where he called divorcing me the biggest mistake of my life. It made headlines. My phone blew up with calls from reporters wanting my response. I gave a single statement: I wish Lawrence well in all his endeavors. My focus is on my gallery and the incredible artists I have the privilege of working with. Translation: I've moved on, and you're not even a footnote in my story anymore. The confrontation I'd been avoiding finally happened on a Tuesday evening. I was closing up the gallery late when I heard the door. Lawrence stood there in a custom suit that probably cost more than my monthly operating budget, and he looked tired. Not physically tired, soul tired. "We need to talk," he said. Not a question, not a request, just that same commanding tone he used in boardrooms. But I wasn't his employee or his wife anymore. I was a woman standing in her own gallery, on her own terms, living her own life. "Do we?" I asked, not unkindly, just genuinely curious what he thought we had left to say to each other. He walked in, and for the next 20 minutes, Lawrence Whitmore III, billionaire real estate mogul, begged. He apologized for everything, for taking me for granted, for not seeing what he had, for being so consumed by building an empire that he forgot to build a marriage. He said he'd changed, that he'd been in therapy, that he understood now what he'd lost. "Give me another chance," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "Please, Brielle. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway." I looked at this man I'd once loved, this man I'd once reshaped myself to fit beside, and I felt nothing but a distant sadness. Not for me, for him, for all the time he'd wasted, for all the moments he'd missed, for the fact that he only wanted me now because I'd become unattainable. "Lawrence," I said softly, "I loved you. Past tense. I loved you so much that I lost myself trying to be what you needed. I was drowning in our marriage, and you never even noticed the water rising. You don't miss me. You miss the idea of me. You miss having someone who made your life easier, who added value to your brand, who smiled pretty at your events. But that woman, she doesn't exist anymore. I killed her to survive you. He tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'd earned the right to finish. You're not looking for me, Lawrence. You're looking for redemption. You want me to be the proof that you've changed, that you can do better. But I'm not your redemption arc. I'm not a chapter in your story about growth and learning. I'm the whole damn book of my own life, and you're barely a footnote. I've changed for you, he insisted. And that's when I knew he still didn't get it. That's the problem, I said. I don't want you to change for me. I want you to change for yourself. I want you to become the kind of man who treats the next woman better, not because he lost someone, but because he learned to value people over empires. But I'm not waiting around to see if you figure that out. I waited enough in our marriage. I walked to the door and opened it, an invitation to leave. He stood there for a long moment, and I saw the exact second he understood. This wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a deal he could sweeten. This was a door closing, and no amount of money or promises would open it again. He left without another word, and I locked the door behind him. Then I sat down in the middle of my gallery, surrounded by art that spoke to souls and stories that deserved to be told. And I cried, not for him, not for us, but for the girl I used to be who thought love meant making herself smaller. She deserved these tears. She'd survived so much to get me here. Devin found me there an hour later. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside me, held my hand, and waited until I was ready to talk. That's the difference between a partner and a placeholder. One waits with you. The other just waits for you to be useful again. 2 years have passed since that night. Sankofa Gallery now has 3 locations. I'm regularly invited to speak at conferences about art curation and supporting emerging artists. Devin and I are building something beautiful and balanced. A relationship where we both get to be whole people, not halves desperately trying to complete each other. I hear about Lawrence sometimes. He eventually remarried a woman who works in philanthropy. From what I understand, he treats her better, comes home for dinner, remembers anniversaries, goes to therapy. I'm genuinely glad. Not because I want him back, God no, but because it means he learned something. It means my pain wasn't entirely wasted. Sometimes I see him at events. The art world and the luxury real estate world overlap more than you'd think. We're polite, cordial even. But there's this look he gets sometimes when he sees me laughing with Devin or discussing a new acquisition with an artist. It's not quite longing. It's more like mourning. He's mourning the version of me he never appreciated, the version of us that could have been if he'd just paid attention. People ask me if I regret the marriage. I don't. It taught me my worth. It showed me exactly what I won't tolerate ever again. They ask if I hate him. I don't. I pity who he was, and I'm genuinely happy for who he's becoming. They ask if I ever think about going back. Never. I don't visit places I've outgrown. And darling, I've outgrown so much more than him. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's evolution. It's becoming so fully yourself that the person who overlooked you can't help but see what they missed. But here's the secret they don't tell you about revenge. By the time you've evolved that much, you don't even care if they're watching anymore. You're too busy living a life so beautiful, so authentic, so utterly yours that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Lawrence spent 5 years teaching me I was forgettable. I spent the next 2 years proving I was unforgettable, not to him, to myself. And that's made all the difference. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button. If you've ever walked away from something that was breaking you, drop a comment. I want to hear your story of survival, of growth, of choosing yourself even when it was terrifying. Subscribe, because I've got more tales of karma, transformation, and people becoming who they were always meant to be. Remember this, you're not the villain for leaving. You're the hero for choosing yourself. Until next time, keep rising.